Hello and welcome to Best Practices. This is Kenneth Berger. My guest today is a good friend and yet another person that I got to meet out in Montana at a Trial by Human workshop. His name is Arcady Frekhtman, and Arcady practices up in Brooklyn, New York. And the whole time we were out in Montana together, Arcady was very soft-spoken, very mild-mannered, very insightful. And then we got into practicing and working on closing arguments. And Arcady blew us all away. I mean, the power that you brought to bear on this closing was several steps ahead and substantially better than what I and some other folks were doing, and was just so impressive. The humility and kind of your humble spirit on the one hand, combined with the authenticity and the power that you brought to this demonstration of a closing you had an upcoming case was really powerful. So with that, Arcady, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. No, it's great to be here. Absolutely.
Arcady, tell us a little bit about your practice up there in Brooklyn.
Yeah, so we have a small personal injury firm. It's me and about 7 other attorneys, and we have about 20 people, and we have offices in Brooklyn. Our main office is in Bensonhurst, which is South Brooklyn, and then we have Bedford-Stuyvesant, which is more North Brooklyn and close to Queens, and then we have offices in Queens as well, in the Bronx and in Manhattan. So we try to make ourselves available for clients anywhere in the New York City area. Mostly we do New York City cases. We tend to focus on serious injuries, trucking, commercial vehicles, construction site accidents, pretty much anything serious where we could help the client. Our mission is like helping serious injury victims and their families. So anywhere where we could step in and help the client, we strive to do that.
And what's funny to hear is when you're like, we're a small personal injury firm, 7 people, a few offices, 20 support staff or so. By South Carolina standards, I mean, that's pretty big.
Oh, right.
But then again, I mean, we've got 5 million people, give or take, in our state, and you've got obviously more than that just in the city.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, New York City, I guess for New York City, we're probably small to medium sized. I mean, there are some firms with like 30 lawyers and even 50 lawyers. I think now we have some of the big firms that are national. They've come to New York. So there's a lot of competition in New York. So, and we see a lot of the billboards and the marketing on the internet everywhere. So it's
So that leads to a question I've always had, which is, in a place like New York City, how do you get cases? I mean, I presume it's similar to how people get cases in South Carolina. I mean, where I am in Columbia, it's not as if we're a small town, but I've just always been interested when you come to a true metropolis, what it is that y'all do from a marketing standpoint to generate work.
Right. So yeah, just tried to stay on the cutting edge of marketing. So back in the day, I remember I was doing pay-per-click, and I think right when it first came out, because I've been doing this since 1999, and I started doing SEO really early. I think when the millennium hit in 2000, I started doing a little SEO, and at one point I was doing great. I was like #1 on the Google My Business, the ABC and the little snack pack. I was #1, so I was getting all these calls, and then I was ranking for whatever keywords I wanted to rank for, and I was at the pay-per-click. So I was really getting a lot of cases. And then with all the changes and all those updates and algorithms, now it's a little bit harder. So what I found that works for me now, I mean, still, I think the internet is the place to be, but I try to carve out a niche. Like, for example, instead of ranking for like accident lawyer, I might rank for ceiling collapse injury lawyer, and get cases like that in Brooklyn or in the Bronx. In fact, it's funny, one weekend I got 8 calls for ceiling collapses in New York City. And I didn't even think there were 8, that happened. That's a lot. And it was just like, I think, between Friday to Sunday, 8 different ceiling collapses, and everybody got injured. It was Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, all over. I guess I was ranking at that point for that search term. So I try to do that. I try to rank for different search terms organically, still do a little bit of pay-per-click. And then the other strategy that I've been doing more recently was I've been doing videos on YouTube, and that's been leading to some cases. So that's been working as well.
So you make a really interesting point about on the SEO side, and for folks who aren't as familiar, search engine optimization. In other words, when people enter terms on Google, that you rank for those terms, not just because you paid for an ad, but because Google recognizes that your page and that content should be the first or one of the first pages it offers, quote unquote, organically. And the very targeted approach, for instance, ceiling collapse. Are there other examples of times where you've gone, again, instead of that shotgun approach, more of that sniper approach towards some of those search terms that have been a benefit to the practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just
without giving away some of your secret sauce.
Oh yeah, sure. No, I don't mind. I feel like happy to share. Basically, like instead of ranking for like personal injury lawyer, which somebody could do, but you'd need so much content and so much of a spend in terms of the marketing people or the SEO companies. And I know a lot of lawyers are kind of wary of some SEO companies because they could charge a lot of money and not do much. And I've had that experience as well. So what I kind of tend to do is find a niche that I'm interested in. For example, like traumatic brain injury or trucking, or it could even be more specific, like garbage truck accident in the Bronx, for example, which is one specific county, one specific location, and only a garbage truck, right? And then you try to rank for that, and then you start getting leads. And because you rank for that, it might also help you in other related areas. So I think it works. Yeah, like ceiling collapses have definitely worked for us. And I think at one point I have to check if we're still, because it's always, the rankings are always fluctuating. But at one point we were ranking for I believe the spinal fusion surgeries, or keywords with regard to spinal surgeries, which are usually really good cases. And we had a nice page built out with some demonstratives that we used in a trial, and we had explanations of all the terms. And it takes a little time to like build out that page, and you need somebody who's more technical who could do the WordPress and write everything for the site, as well as maybe, I don't know, some lawyers maybe would have time to do it on their own. I've done some writing on my own, but for the most part, I know a lot of lawyers will hire like blog writers to write articles, and as long as it's original content and it's quality content, then Google, the robots will find it and rank you. So it's an interesting area. I just find like
I was going to say, one thing I love that you're saying, I think is a really important point, is this targeted approach with your content and toward your internet marketing is with good cases in mind, right? Is with interesting things, the type of case, hopefully the type of client that you ultimately would want to represent, because it's where you could arguably have the greatest impact on that person's life, help in the most meaningful way. And the beautiful derivative of that is it also means that you can make money that allows you to continue going out and helping people on meaningful cases.
Right, exactly. And that's so important. Yeah, we strive to focus our marketing on the types of cases that we want to attract. And then if we have that client who is in need of a lawyer, we feel like if we could help them, then we definitely would be happy to help. And then I just find, it's very rewarding to help someone, even if it's not a big amount of money for me or my firm. If it's just rewarding to be able to help somebody. And yeah, absolutely. Like that's why I was trying to get into these areas where I think the serious cases where the clients need help would be. Because in the past, like when I first started back in 1999, I was, young, just out of law school. I worked for a firm for a year, and I would just take anything I could get. And when I started my own practice in the year 2000, I had at one point a lot of volume, and I don't think we were able to do a good job on all those cases because there was just too many cases. So then we kind of just stopped taking the small cases that met certain criteria, or, take a case maybe because you don't know what the injury will be. And if it turns out to be serious, then you can keep it. If it turns out to be soft tissue, you might have a referral partner in place to give it to that person and have a relationship. So yeah, so now the most recent thing has been the YouTube channel, where we've been I try to do 2 videos a week, and we've had a lot of comments, and I even have a cell phone number that is like a second line on my phone and an app, and people will text me, and then I'll set up consultations and I'll hear them out. And we've gotten some very interesting cases. I was talking to one gentleman, he had a bad truck crash in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Someone else had a slip and fall with a fusion in Mississippi. And what I'll try to do is I'll try to have a lawyer already there that I can work with in each area, and then maybe refer it or be work with them if they need help on the case, participate in the case. So, and I don't do it, I always say on my channel, I'm not trying to take any work from other lawyers if it's like a brand new case, or sometimes it's a change of attorney, but I never want to take a case from another lawyer. It's just, I just want to give them the consultation and then leave it up to them. And I feel like if they feel that, they're being ignored, or they need a new lawyer, I could help them. But if they're happy with their lawyer, I tell a lot of people, just stick with your lawyer, so. And some of the people, of course, are just brand new cases where they don't have lawyers. So it's all different. But a lot of them, I can't really do much more than just speak with them. And I try to find a time every week to speak to a few people, just because I feel like that's it's very rewarding. And then I'm just grateful for the opportunity. I'm grateful that people want to, call me and want to hear what I think their case is worth, and have a free consult. So
when you're just such a genuine, warm person, when you think of trial lawyers, sometimes it's these big bombastic personalities, and you feel the ego emanating, and for you, what I feel is a warmth and a man. This guy's not just in it for him. He is truly here to help me. Arcady, for folks who say, I'd love to start a YouTube channel, but how do you film 2 videos a week? Not in terms of how do you find the time, we can talk about that, but mechanically speaking, what steps do you take to get those videos filmed and then put out on a YouTube channel?
Yeah, so in terms of the mechanics of it, I started the channel a few years ago, and I wasn't putting out content in any regular way. I would just like film a few videos, then not film for 6 months, then film a few videos. And then over time, over a few years, I think I had about 100 videos in there, but I wasn't getting too much traction. And then what I started doing was I started just saying, look, two times a week is a good content calendar. So I try to like build out a content calendar. And I still have to work on it, because to be honest, it's kind of like all over the place. Sometimes an idea will hit my head and I'll put it in my iPhone notes. Sometimes I'll put it in one of those task managers in a desktop app, or sometimes I'll put it in a Microsoft Word document. So I have it all over the place. But the filming is actually fairly easy. I mean, I just use my iPhone. I put it on a little on my desk, and I just shoot it. Sometimes I'll have a little outline, or from the content calendar, or bullet points. Other times I'll read like a blog article. Like there was an example of a really good blog article by another lawyer in New York, where he talked about values based on verdicts for a certain type of injury. I think he did shoulder injury. So I just read that blog, I took some notes, and then I did a video about that, and it seemed to be well received. But other times I'll just talk, I won't have any notes, to just see where it goes, and try to keep it interesting, try to keep it like 10 minutes or less. And it's been going pretty well. I've been getting, I think now on most videos, I'll get at least 300 to 400 views. And I have about close to I think I'm right there approaching 2,000 subscribers. And I think the total view count is about close to 2 million. So it's getting better. It seems like it's building like a little bit of a community, where people who either have questions. They've either been injured in the past, or they have a case now, or family member that. So it's a lot of people ask about value. What's my case worth? Or
Yeah,
they
so
feel
that
like,
was my next question. Was what videos are you finding draw the most viewers, the most questions, the most contacts?
yeah, definitely when you make the video about the viewer, about the client, about like if they have an injury case, what is the case going to be worth? I think I did one video where I talked about a herniated disc, and I said, if it's a car crash and you have enough insurance, if it's just soft tissue treatment, it might be worth, up to 20,000. But if you have a pain management, it might go up to closer to 50. And if you have a surgery, it might be like a few $100,000. And then if you have a fusion, it might be even $1 million or more. And that video people really liked because it was giving a range. It was talking about actual cases that I've handled, and it kind of answered a lot of the questions that people seem to have. But I think that's the question that people really have, like, what's my case worth? I feel like a lot of people feel shortchanged by the insurance company because they might either have a lawyer or deal with the insurance company themselves and just get lowballed. And they just don't understand, why is the insurance company either telling me my claim is denied, or why are they giving me such a low amount where I have a serious injury? I feel like I have, the people will say, I feel like I have emotional distress or PTSD or concussion, or I have a bad herniation, I haven't had surgery, but why are they lowballing me, giving me like twice my medical bills, or without putting a real number on it that's financial justice? So I think that's the question that a lot of people seem to be gathering around in terms of the viewers.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you what's interesting is, on the one hand, these people are being told by an insurance company, or in other instances, let's be honest about it, their lawyer is basically playing the role of insurance adjuster, but only on the plaintiff side, where if the lawyer is processing the information in the range of potential values through the same exact matrix or rubric as an insurance adjuster, I mean, they're at that point, they're not practicing law. They're basically practicing how to adjust claims almost as an outside adjuster. Like, we've got a joke in our office. If someone comes in and starts talking about, the medical bills are this and the lost wages are that, and it's, a little bit of soft tissue, I'm like, man, I am going to we're going to buy a hat that says insurance adjuster, and you are going to wear that damn hat around. What's the case actually about? And hell, sometimes the case is the biggest value driver is a medical bill. Other times it has, little to nothing to do with that medical bill. But if these clients are coming and saying, on the one hand, the information the insurance company and the lawyer are giving me seem to line up with this notion of my medical bills are this, and I should get this much for pain and suffering, and that's it. But on the other hand, the same client is like, well, hold on though. I've been through all this. I've been through sleeplessness. I try to go to bed at night. My neck is killing me. I can't get through the night. I wake up the next day. And I basically spend my life in this very shallow, narrow pool of pain and frustration that's begun to creep into all areas of my life. But they're telling me my medical bills are $10,000, and I get a little bit for pain and suffering. They know on some level that what those insurance folks or their lawyer sometimes is telling them does not match with, is not congruent with the reality of their harm. And I think it's so great that there's someone like you who's putting out content that opens up a wider picture, that looks at value being driven by damages being by a comprehensive assessment of all the ways they've been harmed, all the losses that exist, and not just taking it through that narrow frame of, medical bills and a little bit of money for pain and suffering.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of like what all my videos are about, because the things we learned, like at Trial by Human, and the fact that it's all about the human story and the damage to the life, kind of like the person that it was before the injury and what their passions were, what they loved, and then the person that he or she became after the injury and the difference. And I like to use a lot of community witnesses, friends, family members, coworkers, neighbors, to get that snapshot of their life before and after and show the difference. And I've been doing it with my clients. I've been doing these actually Zoom calls, and sometimes coming to their house too, more now that the pandemic is easing, and doing full interviews with them and sitting down and getting to really know who they are as a person. And I've been trying to convey that in some of the videos, that's one of the steps that we take just to the larger audience. And then all the people that call me on my cell phone number, I've done so many consults, nobody has said that their lawyer knows who they were before they got injured, like their childhood, their biography, and knows who they are even now after they've been injured, and how they've suffered in all the different ways that they've suffered, and their family has suffered, and their all the different values and passions in their life. I know some people call it the diamonds in your life, how the diamonds in your life have been affected. Nobody really.
So, it's funny you mentioned the diamonds in your life. I just got we had our South Carolina Trial Lawyer Association for Justice convention recently, and I was driving back listening to a podcast that Rex Paris had done. And he was talking about trying cases with Brian Panish and talking about the diamonds in your life, and adding up, that weight of the diamonds, cut, clarity, size, or the way other folks have talked about the non-economic assets, the true life assets that we have, and how those assets in our life have been damaged, because that's where the story is. I mean, if I said Arcady, let's say, God forbid, I left the office today and got hit by a drunk driver, tractor trailer. My medical records would tell one story, but my wife, my coworkers, the people at the drive-through Starbucks that I go to a lot, my neighbors, the people that I do community service with, those are the folks that would be able to tell a story much more accurately than a medical record where a doctor comes in for a few minutes, says, Kenny, how you doing? Well, I think I'm doing pretty good. My back still hurts, but I feel like I'm making progress. Note reads, patient progressing as expected, follow up in 6 weeks. So again, if you just take it from the perspective of, what do the medical records say? How much are the medical bills? Did they lose any work? What's that number times 3 or 5 or 6? And you stop there. I mean, I think you're doing a total disservice, not only to the client, but more so to yourself. I mean, it's just no way to go through this profession. Again, at that point, I think you're really just playing the role of outside insurance adjuster versus playing the role of lawyer and professional.
Right. No, I totally agree with you. And it's sad that these insurance companies, that's the way they value the case. They say, oh, based on the medical records, it's worth like $20,000. And here in New York, what a lot of lawyers will do is they'll make a demand, and then the only thing the insurance company will do is try to whittle down that demand. Say, oh, you're demanding too much, demand less, whittle it down to almost nothing, and then settle it for that number. That's why I've tried to also, in the YouTube videos, I talked about flipping the script and doing the settlement opportunity letters based on running with the bulls, where you tell them, hey, this is worth, full justice here is $1 million, pay it. And if you don't, then we're going to go for $5 million once we pick a jury. And that way, I feel like, we don't do that on every case. We do it on the cases that we really believe in, where we feel that we could sit with that client before a jury and take a verdict. But I really think that gives you so much more power as a lawyer, because then if you just take that step, write them that letter, say, pay me within 30 days. If you don't, fine. And your road is so clear. That's your road, right? Your road is, if they paid you, great, you got your $1 million. If they didn't pay you, you're going to trial and you're asking for the $5 million. So you don't have to really worry anymore. Like, your path is made for you. So it's, I think that's a good way to do it. And definitely spending as much time as possible with the coworkers, family, with the client. And I've even gotten this book, I think it's called Human, I think by Brandon, I'm gonna just check here. Humans by Brandon Stanton. And there's one called Humans of New York, and it just tells like stories. So it's just basically the guy, Brandon Stanton, he'll does Humans of New York, all over the world. He'll do like little stories. So he'll show like a person like for example, some people, and just like little human stories, little paragraphs. And it's very interesting, some of the things, some of the nuances and intricacies that you wouldn't even think of, and then it
I'd
kind
always
of
thought,
opens up your mind.
yeah, and I always thought, I don't know if it would work. I'm certainly not a television producer. I always just thought it'd be super interesting back. This is 20 years ago or so, the show Biography, and they do a biography on some famous person. It may be, a biography on Nelson Mandela, a biography on, George Clooney, a biography on all, Julia Roberts, all these famous people. And it was interesting. I always thought it would be super interesting if they just found, kind of the most random people you could find and tell that story. Because, then you've got this book, like you said, Humans, you got, Humans of New York, you see all this content all over the internet where each of us, almost to a person, if not to a person, have a really interesting story, and so when you dig in for the clients to find out the story all the way from the beginning, it's something we talk about a lot is, the temptation is to start that story of harm and damage and loss and change, kind of from the day of the accident or the 6 months, kind of what their life looked like at that time. What we found is when we go back and figure out all the damn hard work our client had to undertake, how much they had to endure to get to where they were at that moment in life, just to have somebody else take it away, just to have someone else's wrongdoing inflict that kind of harm on it. It really begins to show the magnitude of that loss. If I said, Arcady, do you remember the first time you thought maybe I should be a lawyer? Do you remember that the time you spent working through law school? Do you remember studying for the bar exam? Do you remember those first few years? Do you remember this entire arc? That I think makes for a much more compelling story, and people to really start understand the full value, the full magnitude of harm. If, for instance, you could no longer practice versus, Arcady Frekhtman had a successful personal injury practice and was a well-established lawyer who had it taken from him.
Right, exactly. Like you can't know where you're going to go in your future if you don't know where you've been. So once they see where you've been, like your childhood and what's important to you, then they can really value that loss and understand that loss. And I've seen it myself. I've even surprised myself. Like, for example, I had a trial in March of 2020. It was set in Queens County. And there was a nice lady. She got hit by a car as a pedestrian. She had a fracture in her spine. And it was an insurance company. They were trying to pay $20,000. And it was, I believe, a $1 million policy. So right before the trial, I went to her house and I realized that she sleeps in a different bed, in a different room from her husband because of that fracture. She can't sleep on a bed laying down. She has to sleep on an incline bed, sitting up, which is in one room. And her husband of like 30 years has to sleep in a completely different room. And I would have never known this if she never told me that. Not something she ever brought up. If I didn't go to her house, if I didn't find out about her and I learned about like the church that she goes to and the food that she cooks and everything. I try to use the 5 senses when I prep them, everything with what they like to hear, what they smell, everything to really immerse. Because I feel like the jurors are just people from the community that have to make a decision. And then if we can immerse them in using the 5 senses, then you allow them to make a much better decision. And the other point I think is that instead of telling them what something is worth or telling them what happened, I like to show them, like show the jury through little stories, through little dialogue, through these witnesses. Sometimes these community witnesses, like circle of friends type witnesses, could testify for less than 5 minutes, but they help show the story, and that's really powerful. So yeah, definitely, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that I'm trying to do on all the cases right now. I'm trying to get my other team members to do it too. So we work as a cohesive team. So everybody's doing these preps with the human story, and then we should, yeah, it should be a busy season this fall. We have some trials, we have some settlement conferences, trials set. So usually that's what lawyers call the settlement season, right? Between like September and December, when carriers are paying fair settlements, and a lot of trials are going. So we're looking forward to that.
What's the case that you have right now that you're most excited about? And by excited, I mean most passionate, most like, this is, as a lawyer and as a person, this is my favorite case, or these are my favorite cases. And not just from a, not, it's easy for lawyers like, oh, it's the one that may be worth the most money. And sometimes that's true because of the underlying story that validates and warrants the money. Sometimes it's because there's this incredible connection to a client. Sometimes it's because of an incredible connection to an issue. Sometimes it's just because you want to beat the other lawyers or the other side's brains in so bad. But for you, as you're looking ahead to some of these cases, is there one that stands out?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few cases. I would say maybe the cases that deal with traumatic brain injury. I'm kind of interested in that right now. I'm doing a lot of research, attending some CLEs and even some MCLEs for doctors just to learn more about it. And yeah, this one case I was working on recently, I just had depositions where a boy was in his stroller. He was only 3 years old, and they were doing some work on one of the buildings in Manhattan, and a bolt from the window fell and hit him in the head, and he suffered TBI. And now he's older, he's already 15, and the case is still pending. And he recently had all the imaging, the neuroimaging, like the diffuse tensor imaging and other neuroquant, and it came back very positive that he has the brain injury. And before that, the carrier was only offering, I think, like 30,000, and they kept like poo-pooing the case. There's no way this is a six-figure case. There's no way it's not brain injury. And the thing that I really didn't, the thing that really surprised me is that when I sent him even to neurologists, like plaintiff-friendly neurologists, they just kind of looked at him and said, nah, that's probably just because his parents got a divorce. So that's not from the brain injury. But now that he's had the neuroimaging and the neuropsychological testing, and now he has a new neurologist, it's like finally somebody who understands this, that can kind of like, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. They finally found that he does have, which is what I've been saying. I even had a fight with one of the other lawyers in my firm because the other lawyer was like, settle this case for whatever, 30, 40,000. I said, no, I'm gonna do right by this child. I'm gonna make sure, I don't mind paying the first expert, the second expert, the 10th expert. I want to make sure that it's not a traumatic brain injury. And now it's kind of like these final doctors have found that it is a traumatic brain injury, which is what we have suspected all along.
Well, I think you bring up a couple really important points. One is when children suffer a brain injury and brain damage at a young age, the term that I've heard now we talk about is they grow into their injury, right? For a 5-year-old, life can be hard, but from a mental processing standpoint, it's not that damn challenging. Once you get to 13, 14, 15, some of these cognitive challenges, some of these behavioral challenges, some of these emotional, social challenges, they really begin to grow into their injury and evidence themselves throughout the client's life. And I love the point that you make on the neuroimaging. I mean, we just did a presentation recently, and we started off with, by definition, is there a brain injury? Are there lay witnesses, community witnesses, the term you're using, who can talk about the differences before and after for a child? That's very hard to do. So do you have physical evidence of brain injury? The defense always calls it objective damage. And my position is always like, look, when it comes to brain injury, the objective evidence in a case is everywhere. The objective evidence is in losing jobs, losing marriages, losing friends, losing homes. There's plenty of objective evidence. And at the same time, I love having that, if possible, to prove that physical evidence of brain damage. And, you mentioning diffusion tensor imaging, which is looking at axons, neuroquant, which is looking at brain volume and an accelerated atrophy. It's just so critical in certain cases, especially I think pediatric cases, to really prove this thing. And, for your client, you mentioned DTI, DTI, most doctors will tell you, you're not doing that when the child is 5 or 7 or 10, or even up until ages 14 or 15. So, just a lot of respect and gratitude for you waiting in this till this child was 15, sticking with the case for 12 years, and just giving a damn. So on behalf of a lot of us, man, from South Carolina all the way up to New York, thank you.
Oh, thank you. No, I think that was the right thing to do. Hopefully now we'll be able to get full justice for him and for his family, and just really nice people too. So I enjoy talking with them, and like their human story is very compelling too. His mother was out there trying to get people vaccinated and volunteering, and she actually, instead of working for, I know some people work as home health aides, but she actually went out and she just took on a client who's 100 years old, and just helps that client as her personal home health aide. First she did it as a volunteer, and now the family is paying her a little bit, but that's, she just wants to do it to help people. So I feel like they'll be really good witnesses before a jury too, once it goes to trial.
Arcady, just out of curiosity, the young man who's now 15, what challenges, what problems is he having in his life that correlate with brain damage?
Yeah, he's having a lot of different challenges. He has a special placement. So his school has told him that he has a traumatic brain injury, and he's put in a special assessment, individual assessment. And also he just forgets things. Like, for example, one example was that he loves to go to Coney Island and ride the Cyclone and the roller coaster. That's like his favorite thing. And so his mom told him, hey, tomorrow we're going to Coney Island. He was so excited. Then he goes to bed at night. He wakes up the next morning, and then his mom, it's about 9 a.m. His mom's like, are you ready to go? And he's, where are we going? What are you talking about? And he would just forget that, even though it's like his favorite thing is to go to Coney Island, he would forget that that's what they're doing. And just a lot of examples like that. But he's otherwise, but you'd have to do a little bit of a deep dive, because otherwise he's just a normal kid, except for the fact that he's placed in a special program at school, and he has these ideas of these examples of where he forgets things. But
I mean, one thing that we saw, it was the first time we did a brain injury case for a kid. And I remember, our kid was young at the time. I mean, he was 3, almost 4, and he had a hypoxic injury. So, decreased oxygen and ischemic, decreased blood to the brain. And it was bad. I mean, it was bad stuff. But, a week after his injury, his parents are filming him out in the front yard. He's playing ball, having a great time. Initially they're like, oh, he's doing great. We don't see any problems. They were just mad at the daycare for putting a story out in the press that didn't reflect the facts. And we went up there and talked with them, and we asked them to just kind of keep an eye on a few things. And sure enough, within a few months, they start being like, well, he's a lot different than he used to be. He's a lot more impulsive. He doesn't listen as well. He was always our kid who was the most timid and the most sensitive. And now, he's trying to do backflips out of trees. He'll randomly run up to his brother and kick him in the face. He wants to sleep all day. He doesn't want to sleep at night. He's just like a different little kid. And, the defense in that case was like, well, I mean, if jumping out of trees and not listening to mom is evidence of a brain injury, well, I guess we all got kids with brain injuries. And the mistake they were making, and the mistake I was making early on, and then it kind of hit me, was we kept on comparing this little boy to kids without brain damage, when the population pool we needed to compare him to was to children with brain damage. They were treating it as if this was like a plane that had never crashed. Whereas we were treating it as in terms of the facts that actually exist. And that guy, Michael Freeman, I think does a good job of saying, don't deal with hypotheticals that presuppose or insert facts that don't exist. For instance, a rear end crash, in 70% of the cases, people don't hurt their back. Well, this is one of those 30% of cases where someone did hurt their back. And in 95% of those cases, this is what the back injury may look like. Here, even though the number of children with brain injuries may be relatively small, what we know about children with brain injuries is they have the following challenges, problems, impairments. And so when you start looking at it through the proper lens, again, not as a child without a brain injury, but as a child with a brain injury, the evidence started jumping off the page. And we got a very qualified expert to help explain that phenomenon and that truth to the other side, and led to a good outcome. But yeah, I mean, it's just, if you'd taken that little boy at age 3 or 4, it would have been really hard for the other side to understand. Because at 3 or 4, you're not super concerned about a child's memory, but at 13, 14, 15, when that, the executive function, when we really need to start having some impulse control, some multi-step planning, some multi-step execution, as life becomes more challenging, that's where those brain injuries, that brain damage really shows up. So once again, man, thank you so much just for fighting the good fight for what sounds like a very deserving young man and family.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy spending time with the family, and it's almost like a puzzle. You want to get to the bottom of it. And like I was saying before, you can't stop because you might have one neurologist say no and another one say no, but they're not really doing any testing. They're just examining them in the office and just giving you a no. That's almost like an IME doctor here in New York. Some of these DME, defense medical exam doctors will examine a patient for 1 or 2 minutes and then say, oh, there's no injury, or this is all degenerative, and I just can't really base everything on that. So I like to do more of a deep dive and not stop until I get to the real answer.
And and you're working to get to that real answer with your clients. You're working to share those real answers on your YouTube channel and other platforms. And I'm so happy for your success. I'm happy that deserving people are finding you. Arcady, for our listeners, how can they find you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. We have an easy phone number. It's 212-222-1111. That's our main office number, Manhattan number. And then we have our, my email is my first name, Arcady, at 866-ATTY-law.com. And that's the same as our website, just 866-ATTY-LAW.com. It's also a phone number, website, email. So I got that back in, I think, 1999. So I've tried to keep using it. It's easy to remember, and it's attorney law, which is the ATTY, and it has the 866. So you could call it, you could go to the website, and or you could email me. And yeah, and our YouTube is just the name of our firm, Frekhtman Associates. So that's been
and Frekhtman is Frekhtman, Frekhtman, and your first name Arcady is spelled Arkady. All right, and Arcady, now that I've done the spelling, tell us one more time the name of your law firm.
Oh, sure, it's Frekhtman Associates.
Wonderful, and y'all are based in New York City, and just doing a terrific job.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, and we try to help serious injury victims and families, and just give everybody, try to be a resource, like a guide, just to help people. Even if we can't take their case, we try to at least give them some advice or put them on the right path, or recommend someone else, just kind of help them and be that guide, be available for people.
Yeah, it's amazing when the primary objective is to help. It's incredible the ways that you find to accomplish that aim. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for listening to another episode of Best Practices with Kenny Berger. Our guest today once more is Arcady Frekhtman from Brooklyn and throughout New York City, New York. And Arcady, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you. It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.